Mark Goddard should not be reffing championship fights anymore. Yesterday was another example of him stopping a fight way too early, and in my opinion, it hurts the performance of the fighter who won because it raises questions.
Alex Pereira ended up getting booed at the end of the fight, even though he just became a two-division champion, which just ruined the moment for him. But this wouldn't be a problem if it was just a one-time thing, but over the last year, this has happened 3 times. First, we're going to discuss the recent one, which is Pereira versus Prochazka. We both believe that ultimately Pereira would have knocked him out. But because he called it early, Jiri Prochazka got up immediately and was fine. And then people started booing and then they started raising questions. And we couldn't just embrace the moment of Alex Pereira making history. And the last recent one was O'Malley versus Sterling. And if you look again, Mark Goddard was the referee.
Yeah, the Jiri Prochazka one, it was so strange. I mentioned this in our video analysis of Alex Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka, which if you haven't watched it already, check it out after this video. But I mentioned how when Mark Goddard stopped the fight, I was really confused. I was like, what is going on? I thought he called a back of the head shot because it was just so confusing what just happened. And then Jiri Prochazka just turns around immediately and he doesn't protest because Jiri Prochazka is just a very respectable guy. I feel like he's not going to criticize the refereeing, but for a championship fight, I feel like you need to give these fighters an opportunity to fight it out, and it wasn't clear. It didn't look like Jiri Prochazka wasn't defending himself because he did fall down and he had an opportunity to defend himself. I would say that Alex Pereira definitely would have finished him on the ground, but there seems to be a question now. We shouldn't have these questions after a fight. Oh, would he have been finished? Would he have not been finished? We should know, okay, that fight was done. It was clearly early, and it almost leaves a sour taste in the fan's mouth, in my opinion, when a fight is stopped early and it takes away from the winner as well.
Obviously, there's, 2 sides of the argument, right? Like this one where Prochazka probably would have been finished and Mark Goddard saved him from inevitable damage that could really hurt his career. And then you have the other side of the spectrum, which is when John Jones finished Daniel Cormier with the head kick. If you look at that fight, Daniel Cormier probably took an extra 2 or 3 shots.
I think it was like 4 or 5.
Yeah, it could have been even more than that. But the fans low-key preferred that. And I would even say the fighters kind of do because he gave Cormier every chance in the world to recover and try and get back in the fight because it was such a big fight. Yet Mark Goddard does it on the opposite end, which typically leaves fans more upset.
Yeah,
with this one,
yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like you mentioned before, that was a good point. So you have the spectrum. You have one spectrum which is it's too early and one spectrum where it's too late. Obviously, the referees aren't always going to be perfect and they want to try and find a good middle ground, but Mark Goddard has shown consistently in 3 different title fights that he's going to do it early, and if anything, we shouldn't be having a guy that does it early in title fights because the champions have more to fight for. If you're fighting for a contender fight, you're going to be like, okay, I was done. I wasn't going to fight through. But when you have everything on the line, when you have the championship on the line, you should give the fighter a chance. And in my opinion, he wasn't clearly showing that he was out or that he wasn't defending himself. So moving on to the Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley one, me and him were watching that fight, and we were actually watching it at a bar, so there wasn't any volume. And then right when it happened, we were like, oh, the fight just ended. And, like we said the other one before, he has a claim to stop the fight, but again, it was early, and we would have liked to see more from someone like Aljamain Sterling, who is arguably one of the best bantamweights of all time. And the claim was because he turned on his back, stop the fight. Well, then when people turn around their back, most people will do submissions when that happens.
I mean, Oliveira does it frequently, and he's won 3 fights where he gets knocked down and he's on his back. Imagine if Mark Goddard had reffed those fights. We would have missed out on great finishes and great moments as well. Luckily, in this last pay-per-view event with Jiri has that samurai mindset. So I see him being the type of guy to say, oh yeah, it was finished, I was finished, just because that's his mindset. He believes going forward that does better for him than saying, oh, I wasn't done, I was fine. But we saw the consequences of these early stoppages in the Sterling fight and in the Pereira Adesanya 1 fight. So in the Sterling versus O'Malley fight, obviously it was kind of an early stoppage. Sterling was pretty humble about it, but he did feel it was an early stoppage.
Yeah, Merab was saying.
I was gonna say Merab went on Twitter and just if there was yelling on Twitter, it'd be Merab over that situation, which obviously has to be from feedback he got from Sterling, and it almost gave Sterling a reason to get a rematch after that. So it kind of raises a lot of questions, and we saw that with the Adesanya versus Pereira fight, the first one, where Pereira had him out on his feet and Mark Goddard stopped the fight. And eventually, Adesanya was saying, I wasn't rocked. It was my leg. He was making a bunch of excuses. That's the consequence of stopping the fight early.
Yeah, and, Adesanya is a child, so he's obviously going to make excuses now. And then Pereira had to say, Adesanya, you have to stop making excuses. But it takes away from Pereira's win. Pereira had a great win, one of the best, in my opinion, that's one of my favorite fights of all time. 5th round knockout, and then you see Israel Adesanya saying, I wasn't out, it was just my foot, and Adesanya claiming, I would have just taken him down and beaten him up again. It makes that claim, it hurts, unfortunately, happened to Alex Pereira twice, it hurts his win, and he robbed us of an opportunity, Mark Goddard robbed us of an opportunity to see Adesanya go out cold, and that would have been a great moment, but I'm just kidding, obviously we don't want the fighters to go out, but
Goddard saves them from inevitable damage, but it raises the excuses, and for the fans, it kind of ruins the moment as well. Obviously, we want to protect the fighters, but it gets to a point where the fighters are even upset that they're stopping the fight early.
Yeah, and, you have to find a balance of, protecting the fighters, but also letting them fight. At the end of the day, if there's a protect your fighters thing, you're going out and you're going to a fight where you're taking shots to the head. We're obviously not advocating for people to get cracked and take unnecessary damage, but in my opinion, it's not unnecessary damage. And we're talking about damage, then you're going out there to fight at the end of the day. And we want to see the fight with definitive endings. Sergey Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall, same pay-per-view. A great example of the stoppage. He hit him once, then, he was wobbled a little bit, then he hit him again, but the referee didn't even stop the fight there. He gave Sergey Pavlovich an opportunity to get up from the ground. He took 1 or 2 shots, and it's done.
Yeah, and he called it out. And now we're actually going to move on to the Covington versus Usman 1 fight, the title fight. Mark Goddard also reffed that fight, and that has to be one of the worst reffed title fights I have ever seen in my life. So with Usman, when he got poked in the eye, Covington said it wasn't an eye poke. It was an eye poke, but he got a lot of rest, and we know Usman, he was grabbing the wrong eye and stuff like that. But he had a fake nut shot, which gave Usman a break, which you can say a lot of the referees make that mistake. But then when Covington legitimately got poked in the eye, he said no breaks. We had too many breaks, even though that would have been Covington's first break.
It was so biased refereeing, and then that kind of leads on to the finish. People even say that one was an early stoppage, but Usman was just smacking him on the back of the head. Mark Goddard didn't do anything, and I feel bad for Covington because as much as me and him are Leon Edwards fans, and we obviously know Leon Edwards, I do like Colby Covington. I think he's great for the sport. I think he's funny. And the fact that he got that taken away from him, you could clearly see that Colby Covington, he's mentioned it before, obviously it's hard because the worst thing that could happen to a fighter is that they don't get closure at the end of the day. DC had mentioned it with the John Jones steroids, that he doesn't, he has uncertainty and he doesn't know. The same thing could happen with Jiri Prochazka. He doesn't know, and then on the other side, Alex Pereira, he might have gotten a great win that he doesn't get the credit for. And, I'm a big Alex Pereira fan, and it almost left a sour taste in my mouth because I would have liked to have seen a definitive ending versus, I don't know, would Alex Pereira finish him? It just is not as sweet. It leaves a sour taste in people's mouth, and it leaves uncertainty, and we don't want that as the fans. I think the Sergey Pavlovich-Tom Aspinall fight was a great example of when you should stop the fight. Because at the end of the day, it's a fight. Okay, we obviously aren't advocating for people to take extra shots on the ground and to get knocked out cold. But, at the end of the day, there's a difference between early stoppage versus a correct stoppage when the fight is clearly over.
And I would even argue, I think a lot of people would say that the Covington versus Usman fight we shouldn't have been stopped at all. And he stopped that one. It was poor because Covington was having to grab Usman's leg because he was getting hit in the back of the head.
Yeah.
And then it was a minute left of the fight. Give Covington every shot in the world to get out of there and maybe go to the decision because he was winning on one of the judges' scorecards. I know Usman would have ultimately won because of the knockdowns in the last round, but you still have to give him the shot because there was a chance he was up 3-1 on the scorecards.
Yeah, and, on fights like that, Herb Dean has a habit of allowing fighters, sometimes to a fault, allowing fighters a little bit extra damage towards the end of rounds. But, we've had Herb Dean ref a lot of the championship fights and we haven't seen this. So we're not saying fire Mark Goddard. We're not saying to fire him because obviously people make mistakes and you can even argue that those stoppages are justified. You can have that claim. But in my opinion, it's not justified for championship fights when they have everything to fight for. So what I think should happen, Mark Goddard should not fight championship fight or should not ref championship fights and that he should ref other fights, not because obviously he's a good referee if he's up in and even having the opportunity to ref championship fights. Have someone else do it. Maybe have Jason Herzog, have Herb Dean ref the championship fights.
Dan Mergliotta, I feel like, was the good one. He was the one who refereed the Aspinall-Pavlovich fight. That's a good one. Those are good stoppages. But over the last year, this has happened 3 times. Other than that, I have never seen this happen where we have early stoppages in championship fights, which just leaves a lot of consequences at the end of the day.
It takes away from the fans, because like I said before, it left a sour taste in my mouth. All of them left a sour taste in my mouth. The Pereira one is like, oh my God, Adesanya's making excuses, and it would have been nice to see Adesanya get knocked out. And then
The Sterling O'Malley
fight, I watched. I was like, man, that could have been a different fight, because we had both predicted Aljamain Sterling to win. Because why would you have picked Sean O'Malley to win? And we were like, damn, he turned on his back. By the end of the day, turning on your back is a legitimate move in UFC, in MMA, especially with Sean O'Malley not being a submission artist or anything. That's a legitimate move. And then this Pereira Prochazka fight, I was like, damn, I'm happy Pereira won. I'm a big Pereira fan, but I would have liked to see a definitive win. It would have made the win much sweeter, and then it takes away from the fighters. Maybe Alex Pereira's like, man, like I beat this guy, but people are saying I didn't actually beat him. And then Jiri Prochazka's like, man, I lost, but what would have happened if I had a couple extra seconds? Would I have been able to get up? Would I have been able to change this fight? So
we'll never know, but I think moving forward, we probably shouldn't have him repping title fights. I think that's our solution. Let us know your guys' solutions.
Yeah, do you guys think those were early stoppages? Do you disagree with us? Do you think that the priority should be the fighter's health? And if it seems like the fight's going to end, if they should stop it a little bit early, or if it's a big point that we made, there are a little bit of differences between the championship fights versus the typical ranked fights or unranked fights. So let us know in the comments. I hope you guys like the video. Please subscribe if you want more content like this, and we'll see you guys in the next video.